In this video, I wanted to expand upon a tweet of mine where I said that Americans need second residency in Mexico and everybody else, Canadians, Europeans, etc., need second residency in Paraguay. So I'm going to use this video to basically elaborate on this concept and explain why. And fundamentally, it comes down to the US being a citizenship-based taxation system. I imagine most of my followers and audience understands this, but just to go over it real quick, the United States is the world's, or basically the world's only citizenship-based taxation country, whereas Canada, Europe, Australia, and countries like that have a residency-based taxation system. What that effectively means is that Americans are taxed on their worldwide income, no matter where they are, no matter if they have acquired residency somewhere else, no matter how few days per year they spend in the US. Americans cannot escape the American tax system. And so therefore, the way that you structure your life and your finances and your taxes needs to take this into consideration, that as an American, you're always going to have to file U.S. tax returns. And if you live in, say, like another high tax country, like, Spain or something like that, you have a very complicated tax situation where you're filing in Spain, you're filing in the U.S., and you're trying to, see what kind of treaties and foreign tax credits you can use to offset those taxes. So with that situation in mind, why Mexico works for Americans is because Mexico works great as a Plan B residency where there's low physical presence requirements. And yes, Mexico is a high tax country if you get into the tax system, but as an American, you're not really going to get into the tax system in Mexico because Mexico applies a test that's called the Economic Center of Life test. And Mexico is really unrealistic to be your economic center of life. As an American, all the incentives and structures are set up in a way such that the United States will always stay your economic center of life. You're going to keep your money in the U.S. You're going to make money in the U.S. You're going to use U.S. LLCs. You're going to have your pension and Social Security and so forth from the U.S., right? And so Mexico basically works as a Plan B residency. You can get temporary or even permanent residency. If you start on temp, you can work towards permanent residency with very little physical presence. And also, of course, the proximity, right? It's a country that we share a huge border with, the USA and Mexico. So the proximity is there. There's very cheap direct flights. It's in the same time zone. It's a much lower cost of living. And so not only is it a good Plan B residency, but it's a good Plan B just overall as a place with much cheaper health care, a place where elder care or senior care is much cheaper. The cost of living is much lower. And we're seeing clients at MyLatinLife of every age group looking to move to Mexico. We get, the young digital nomads in their 20s and early 30s. We're getting families from the U.S. that want to move to Mexico, big families. Like I was talking to a guy yesterday, family of 7. He has 5 boys, and they moved to Mexico, and they're absolutely loving it. And then, of course, for the retirees, you can make that Social Security income and the savings you've accumulated over your lifetime stretch much further in Mexico on that lower cost of living. And the healthcare is really, really good. Healthcare in Mexico is absolutely amazing, probably worthy of its own video. But, the prescriptions are much cheaper, doctor's appointments are cheaper, specialists are easier to get, and the equipment is very advanced and so forth. So even if you don't want to fully relocate to Mexico, it's a great back pocket Plan B because you can maintain residency in Mexico with very, very low physical presence. Okay? So Americans can do residency in Paraguay. I mean, I have U.S. citizenship and I also have permanent residency in Paraguay in addition to Mexico and other countries. But Mexico is the one that kind of makes the most sense. And then to address sort of the second part of the tweet, which is why Paraguay is the best first option for Canadians and Europeans and Australians, it's because these people are coming from a residency-based taxation system. And so if they get residency in a territorial tax country, in a low tax country like Paraguay, then you have the option to either immediately change your tax residency to Paraguay, or again, kind of have it as a plan B, where at some point in the future, if you want to pull the trigger, you can essentially opt out of your high tax country's system and say, hey, I don't want to be a Canadian tax resident anymore. Bye, Canada. I've moved to Paraguay. And you'll already have that residency set up and ready to go. And you can basically switch over and, ideally get to a zero tax setup. So for Americans, getting to zero tax is difficult. It's doable, but not easy. But for Canadians and Europeans, etc., it's actually much easier than you think to get to a zero tax setup. And Paraguay is probably the most popular option. Now, you could really pair this ideally with any territorial tax country, like the tweet regarding how everyone needs Paraguay residency. What they really need is territorial tax residency in ideally sort of a paper residency or a residency that can be maintained with low physical presence. So I have a client I was speaking to yesterday who's Canadian, and he's going to be doing Panama because he just genuinely prefers it and wants to live in Panama and, wants to get an apartment with ocean views and, do crypto and that kind of thing. And he wants to be in Panama. He wants to be in some ways a more livable country than Paraguay. Although if you haven't been to Paraguay, it's a lot more livable than you think. But Paraguay is a very accessible Plan B residency for pretty much everybody because there's no financial solvency requirements. There's no investment needed. All you need for us to get you residency in Paraguay is a copy of your birth certificate, apostilled, and a copy of a police check, apostilled, and that police check is going to be valid for 6 months. Okay, so with just a birth cert and a police check, you can rock up to Paraguay and we can get you residency in less than a week in Paraguay. There is a path to direct permanent residency in Paraguay, if you're wondering, and I made a dedicated video about that, so you can check the other Paraguay video we have on PR using the SAUCE program, the SUACE program. But most people are going to opt for to start as a temporary resident, the normal path to Paraguay residency, which does not require an investment, and you'll start as a temp resident. You'll get a 2-year temp permit, and then after 2 years, that will renew to permanent residency. And you really don't need to spend much, if any, time in Paraguay during those 2 years to be able to successfully renew to permanent residency in 2 years. So that's why it works really well as a Plan B. Similar to Mexico, Mexico works well as a Plan B, where maybe you start on temp, and in the case of Mexico, after 4 years, it renews to permanent. In the case of Paraguay, after 2 years, it renews to permanent. But the thing is that Americans won't get as much incremental value out of residency in a territorial tax country because they can never escape U.S. taxes. In some ways they do, and this is something that is probably worthy of its own video, basically how to match being a U.S. citizen, speak Spanish, matching U.S. citizenship with territorial tax residency, and therefore taking advantage of the foreign earned income exclusion. I'll have to make that a dedicated video. But basically, Canadians and Europeans and so forth, they just get much more value out of a territorial tax residency because that's really what's going to allow them to escape their high tax country and move to a territorial tax system, lower their taxes, and sort of live the good life, the low tax life that they've always dreamed of after just getting pissed off paying 50% every year. So hopefully this video explained a little bit more of the logic behind the tweet that Americans need Mexican residency and everybody else needs Paraguay residency. Or really, we should say everybody else needs territorial tax residency. And I know at the same time this video might have opened up more rabbit holes than it closed, and so we're going to have to explore those in further videos. So all the more reason to subscribe to the channel, MyLatinLife. And also, you have the opportunity to become our client. You can book a call with us. There's going to be a link in the description where you can book a call with us. At this moment, it's only $49 to book a call and speak directly with me, Vance, and we'll look at your holistic situation. We'll build a game plan, and we're going to get things going real quick. So, please like, subscribe, share, book a call, and we'll see you in the next video.